Well, like all standoffs, all tensions, an interlocutor plays the crucial role of calming tensions. But the biggest casualty of Trump's trade war has been the trust deficit, which has left no country in a possible position to act as a trusted mediator between the U.S. and China. Worse still, for both Xi Jinping and Donald Trump, it makes perfect political sense to continue this trade war, which may become worse than the 2017 one, as both leaders have learned from those experiences and are possibly playing on brinkmanship. And viewers, to talk more on this, I'm now joined by Bhumika Tharoor, who is managing editor at The Atlantic, to talk more about what this means in terms of the tariff war that's underway. Bhumika, let me start by asking you, the fact that tariffs have roiled the market, trade war between the world's largest and second largest economies has only worsened. Help us decode the irreparable damage, or do you think there is irreparable damage that has been done to the U.S. economy because of the flip-flop that this week has really seen?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, and actually this morning we saw that China has imposed tariffs against the U.S. now to 125%. And so what I think we're waiting to see now is what happens when you have these two giant, formidable countries in a standoff against each other, right? And what that means for example, for American consumers, what it means for consumers abroad. And presumably in this type of situation, you would hope that the best position to be in for the U.S., for example, is to then partner with its allies and find ways to then form a stronger barrier against China, or to have more negotiating power that way.
Bhumika, the fact that China has increased their tariffs, the president has even said that he's now not going to back down. This is tough positioning, isn't it? Are you looking at a long, maybe a protracted trade war between the two largest economies in the world?
This is what's going to be, this is difficult to say, but what we know is that, initially Trump was elected largely, or partially at least, because people viewed him as the CEO president, the businessman president. But the reality is that what this has all caused is a lot of uncertainty and instability, and every investor, CEO, foreign government knows that the worst thing for any in any kind of business environment is instability and uncertainty. It means that businesses may be hesitant to grow in terms of hiring, or consumers will kind of clamp down more their spending. They'll be more conservative because everyone's uncertain about what happens next. And I think all of this is going to manifest in the trade war. But when you have people who are spending less, when you have companies who are hiring less, these are all triggers for a recession, or these are all warning signs for a recession. So it's possible that that we are engaged in a long trade war. China has been very clear about their firm stance, and they don't feel inclined to, at this point at least, to back down. Trump has made very clear that he feels very strongly about this. But of course, as we've seen, and as has to some extent been the case of the Trump administration, that there's a lot of whiplash. There's a lot of quick turns, abrupt decisions. And so it's true, we currently have a pause for 90 days, obviously, with the exception of China with regards to reciprocal tariffs. But it's to be seen what moves happen in the meantime. But even, and my colleagues have written about this, that even if there is a pause or there's a temporary reprieve, the lasting kind of sentiments, economics are largely based on human behaviors, and then the lasting sentiments around this will be a lot of trepidation and worry for what might happen. But I think, in this world with so many quick pivots, it's hard to predict, but it seems like people are really, these larger states are rooted in.
Indeed. Indeed. You mentioned about the 90 days. I want to ask you this, that what happens after the 90-day pause? Because there's enough and more uncertainty. What happens? Because 3 months is a very long period and no one knows what will happen then.
Yeah, I mean, listen, a lot can happen in 3 months, because we've seen a lot happen in the last week. the last week has felt almost like a year. So at this stage, anything can happen. Trump initially signaled that he's open for negotiations. He's not open to negotiations. There's a lot of back and forth. I think what's the mystery is what is moving a lot of the decisions internally. What ultimately was the pressure that felt heavy enough for Trump to change positions. We've heard from different people within the administration that everyone's on board with this decision, and then this is what's great. Trump had the analogy that these proposals and these tariff policies are akin to a sick patient having to take medicine, and so it's going to be terrible for a little bit, but then we'll get through it. But then, of course, very quickly we saw a pivot and we had the pause. So anything can happen within these 90 days, but I
Yes,
think
yes.
the one thing that's certain is that the stain and the kind of the instability that this has caused has for sure created a lot of uncertainty within people who help keep the economy moving.
And in the midst of this, where do you see countries like India? We are heavily dependent on China, but we're also having America as our largest trading partner.
Yeah, India's in an interesting position. And I think, this is something a lot of countries are thinking about. The point that I made earlier about the U.S. and its position with allies, if we, in what seems likely, if we end up in a position where the U.S. is posed against China, the best thing would be to for the U.S. to build partnerships with its allies that are then beneficial for the allies themselves who are thinking about their exports and their imports. But we've seen, rhetoric where initially Trump had mentioned he wanted to annex Canada or encroach upon Greenland. And I think it's complicated all around. I'm curious what India's stance will be, especially as this country with different ties or allegiances for various reasons between the U.S. and China. I think that'll be an interesting story to see how it plays out.
All right, let's leave it there, Bhumika. I really appreciate you joining me today as the top voice this week on India Sense.